The following is a presentation of Got Questions Ministries.
What is atheism?
I don't believe I've ever heard a theist answer this question honestly. It's inevitably a straw man meant to further their own ends. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Gosh, it sure is easy to defeat an argument when it says what you want it to say. But are you more interested in winning or in the truth?
Atheism is the view that God does not exist.
So right away we're off to a terrible start. Because, no, it's not. Atheism is not the assertion that a God does not exist, but rather the absence of belief in a deity, for whatever reason.
Atheism is not a new development. Psalm 14, verse 1, written by David around 1000 BC, mentions atheism. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God."
The fool says in his heart that Star Trek is better than Star Wars. See, I can do it too. Saying you don't believe like I do, therefore you're a dumbass, is hardly a reasonable or convincing argument.
Recent statistics show an increasing number of people claiming to be atheists, up to 10% of people worldwide. So why are more and more people becoming atheists? Is atheism truly the logical position atheists claim it to be?
Yes. Next question.
Why does atheism even exist? Why doesn't God simply reveal himself to people, proving that he exists? Surely if God would just appear, the thinking goes, everyone would believe in him.
Well, most of us anyway. After all, evidence does tend to be a bit of a convincer. But belief isn't enough, is it? We'd have to want to worship your God, to follow him too. And frankly, your God's not a nice guy.
The Lord is vengeful. O spiteful one, show me who to smite, and they shall be smoten.
So even if I did believe, there's a very good chance I would oppose your God.
The problem here is that it is not God's desire to just convince people that he exists. It is God's desire for people to believe in him by faith.
Which is really obnoxious and kind of a cheat, either on the part of your God or on the part of those who purport to believe in him. Well, let me grant you, purely for the sake of argument, that your God does in fact exist. Why would he want you to be gullible? And don't kid yourself, having faith is the same as gullibility. Believing on somebody else's say-so with no other evidence is being gullible. And why would your God want that? Wouldn't he want his followers to be, intelligent? And if there is no God, that makes religion just one big con game. And don't fool yourself, there are people out there who use religion as a way to control people or to make money. No matter how you look at it, the only good reason to be convinced of something is to have looked into it, researched it, found evidence that it is the case. Anything else is either gullibility or wishful thinking. Even if it is true, without evidence, you don't have a good reason to believe in it.
God clearly demonstrated his existence many times in the Old Testament. Did the people believe that God exists? Yes. Did they turn from their evil ways and obey God? No.
Evil ways? Well, that's a point of view. One person's evil ways might be another person's kick-ass weekend. And in the Old Testament, your God was kind of a jerk. He was always either torturing people just to test their belief in him, or he was destroying all life on the planet just because he was cranky that people weren't doing exactly what he said.
Oh, spiteful one.
If a human was pulling that kind of crap, we'd declare him an enemy and hunt him down. So why should a God be any different?
If a person is not willing to accept God's existence by faith, then he or she is definitely not ready to accept Jesus Christ as Savior by faith. Ephesians 2 verses 8 and 9. God's desire is for people to become Christians, not just theists, those who believe God exists.
Now hold on a moment. Let's just suppose that Jesus really is the nice guy that you churchy folks all think he is. Why wouldn't we want to follow someone who says, hey, let's all love each other? The problem here is twofold. First, I'm not going to follow Jesus. I could agree with what he says about how to treat people and incorporate it into my behavior, into my life, without giving my allegiance to the church. And the second problem, of course, is faith. Because with this allegiance comes a lot of baggage. I'm not merely expected to believe that people ought to behave nicely toward each other. I'm also supposed to believe in the supernatural, in resurrection, in the afterlife, in sin, in eternal punishment for sin. And I'm also supposed to believe that this God is the only and correct God. Wars have been fought over that kind of thing with people who have other gods, none of which can be proved and must be believed on faith. Anybody should be able to see why I would want to have sufficient information to make an informed and intelligent decision before I altered my life in such a significant fashion, in a way that would affect not merely me, but the people with whom I interact. Anybody should be able to see how that makes sense. But religion is one of the only times that we're expected to not have information before making that choice. And it's certainly the only time where we're threatened with punishment if we don't do it.
The Bible tells us that God's existence must be accepted by faith. Hebrews 11 verse 6 declares, "And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him."
But having faith and earnestly seeking are polar opposites. Once you have faith, you're already convinced it exists, and you stop seeking.
The existence of God must be accepted by faith, but this does not mean belief in God is illogical.
If belief in something, anything, is based 100% on faith, on no evidence at all, yes, it is illogical. And when we say we have faith in things like our friends, we don't really have faith. We've seen their behavior, and that's evidence of how they'll behave again. We're extrapolating from previous data, from evidence. That's not faith.
There are many good arguments for the existence of God. The Bible teaches that God's existence is clearly seen in the universe.
Even if that were true, it's not. That would mean that you're basing your belief not on faith, but on evidence.
With all that said, the existence of God cannot be proven. It must be accepted by faith.
So despite all of that claimed evidence, it still comes down to believe for no good reason because we said so.
At the same time, it takes just as much faith to believe in atheism, to make the absolute statement, God does not exist.
Straw man, that is not what atheism is. Atheism is the absence of belief in a deity. It's the state of not being a theist for any reason. Well, let's suppose that atheism does take faith. It doesn't, but just for the sake of argument. So what? There's no good reason for either side to engage in faith. And saying essentially, you do it too, is not a valid argument for your side. It's a shut-up tactic. Now, do you have an actual defense of your position, or are you just trying to make a shut up and go away?
To make the absolute statement, God does not exist, is to make a claim of knowing absolutely everything there is to know about everything, and of having been everywhere in the universe and having witnessed everything there is to be seen.
I know almost no atheists who make those claims. There are some, but most of those who make any statement at all say that it's the lack of evidence that keeps them from believing in a God, that those who claim there is a God have failed at the burden of proof, indeed say that they don't have to prove anything because they believe by faith. In other words, the reason most atheists are atheists is because faith is a problem.
Atheists cannot prove that God does not, for example, live in the center of the sun, or beneath the clouds of Jupiter, or in some distant nebula. Since those places are beyond our capacity to observe, it cannot be proven that God does not exist. It takes just as much faith to be an atheist as it does to be a theist.
And this is a good argument for the existence of God, or for having faith in one. How exactly? Leaving aside the fact that it's a complete and total straw man argument, it's still that shut-up tactic I mentioned before. Claiming that the other side is being hypocritical doesn't strengthen the argument for God's existence in any way.
Obviously, Christians strongly believe that God does exist, and admit that God's existence is a matter of faith. At the same time, we reject the idea that belief in God is illogical. We believe that God's existence can clearly be seen, keenly sensed, and proven to be philosophically and scientifically necessary.
And once again, I have to point out that this is a contradiction. Either you have faith or you have evidence. And philosophically and scientifically necessary? I assume since science is listed separately that by philosophy we're talking about metaphysical and moral philosophy, none of which will prove the objective, empirical existence of something. As for science, there are many things in this universe that used to be attributed to a deity, but which have since been found to be entirely natural. So who's to say that the things we haven't figured out yet will require a god? This is called the God of the Gaps argument, and the places that your deity can fit keep getting smaller and smaller. A rational, reasonable skeptic reserves judgment in the absence of evidence. This is why I'm an apistivist, one who rejects faith as a method for gathering knowledge. If you truly wish to know about the universe around you, including whether a god exists, then faith is without a doubt the wrong tool to use. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.